My legs carried me faster than I thought they could. The hallway behind me was a blur. Polished floors, tall walls, closed doors, and the only thing pushing me forward was the conversation I had overheard 20 minutes ago in the East Wing laundry room. The rare Omega, the one with the calming aura. They've already agreed on a price. When? 3 days. Maybe less. I hadn't waited to hear the rest. I had dropped the folded linens onto the cart, stepped back against the wall, and listened to my own pulse crash through my ears like a drum that someone had struck too hard. Then I ran. My name is Casper. Casper Nolan. I am 19 years old, and for the last 8 months, I have worked as a household maid inside the Aldridge estate, one of the most powerful alpha households on the entire east coast of America. I dust shelves. I press shirts. I carry breakfast trays up 3 flights of stairs before sunrise. I keep my head low and my presence small, because that is what rare Omegas learn to do when they want to survive. Most people do not know what I am. I keep it hidden. The soft gold shimmer that shows up on my skin when I am overwhelmed, the strange way the air around me grows calm when I am frightened, the fact that every alpha who steps within 10 feet of me suddenly stands a little straighter without knowing why. I have been hiding it since I was 12 years old, and my last guardian sold my information to a buyer who arrived at the door with a briefcase and a cold smile. I escaped that time. I was terrified I would not escape this time. So I ran through the east corridor, turned left at the grandfather clock, pushed through the heavy glass door at the back of the main hall, and stepped out into the garden. The Aldridge garden was enormous. It stretched behind the estate like a secret world. Rows of tall hedges cut into perfect walls, stone pathways winding between flower beds full of white roses and deep purple lavender, iron benches placed in quiet corners where the trees grew thick enough to block the evening sky. I had always loved this garden. In 8 months of working here, it was the one place I came to breathe. The one place where the pressure of being invisible loosened just slightly. I ran until I reached the far end, past the stone fountain, past the old oak tree, all the way to the back corner where a low stone bench sat half-hidden beneath a weeping willow. The branches hung down like long curtains, and behind them, the world outside disappeared entirely. I sat down. My chest rose and fell in uneven bursts. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, even though the evening air had a sharp edge to it, but from the fear that had taken root in my stomach and was growing very fast. 3 days, maybe less. I pressed my palms flat against my knees and tried to think clearly. I needed a plan. I needed to figure out where to go, how to get there, whether I could access the small amount of money I had saved in the tin beneath my bed without being seen. I needed to, but my body had other ideas. The garden was quiet. The lavender was blooming. The willow branches swayed gently around me, and underneath all that terrifying fear, I was also exhausted. The kind of exhausted that 8 months of early mornings and late nights and constant invisibility builds up in a person without warning. My thoughts began to slow. My eyelids grew heavy. I told myself I would rest for just a minute. Just 1 minute, and then I would make a plan. I did not make it to the plan. I fell asleep on that stone bench beneath the weeping willow, with fear still sitting in my chest and the evening light fading to dark blue all around me. I did not hear the back door of the estate open nor the 3 sets of footsteps that moved through the main hall and spread out in 3 different directions. I did not hear the voices, 3 of them, low and urgent, calling a name through the corridors and rooms and staircases of the Aldridge estate. They were calling my name, but I was already asleep. Aldridge estate. Same evening, 1 hour earlier. The moment it happened, all 3 of us felt it at the same time. My name is Griffin Aldridge. I am 23 years old, the eldest of the Aldridge triplets by 4 minutes, and I have spent the majority of my adult life believing that the concept of a fated mate was something other people experienced. Something that happened in stories or to families with weaker bloodlines, or simply to people who were more open to that kind of thing than I was. I was wrong. Declan felt it first, though he would later argue that we all felt it at exactly the same second. He was in the East Library working through the quarterly estate accounts when he later described it as the ground shifting. Not literally, but something shifted. Something important. Preston felt it in the gym on the 2nd floor. He had been 3 sets into a workout when he dropped the weight he was holding, sat down on the bench, and stared at the wall for 30 seconds without understanding why. I felt it in my office on the 3rd floor. Came as a pull. The only way I can explain it is that it felt like a thread, invisible but absolutely real, that had suddenly drawn tight in the center of my ribcage. Not painful, almost gentle, like something had always been there, loose and unnoticed, and had simply decided to remind me of its existence. I stood up from my desk. I walked to my office door, opened it, stepped into the hallway, and nearly collided with Declan, who had come up the stairs from the 2nd floor at the same moment. He was still holding a pen. We stared at each other. "You felt that," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," I said. Preston appeared at the end of the hallway 30 seconds later, still in his workout clothes, hair slightly damp. He looked between us. Something in his expression was open in a way it very rarely was. Preston was the quietest of the 3 of us, the one most likely to observe before he spoke, and the fact that his face was showing everything he felt was unusual enough to make my chest tighten. "An Omega," Preston said quietly. "Our Omega." None of us said anything for a moment. I had read about this in the family records once, that when triplet alphas were bonded to a single rare Omega, the recognition happened simultaneously. A shared pull, a shared awareness. 3 halves of something that had always been incomplete suddenly understanding what was missing. Reading about it and experiencing it were very different things. "Where is he?" Declan said. And that was when we realized we knew the pull. We knew the direction. We could feel it like a compass needle pointing somewhere in the estate. But the estate was enormous, and the feeling was not specific enough to tell us exactly where. "We search," I said. "Every room." We split up. Declan took the east wing, the kitchens, the laundry room, the staff quarters, the storage rooms. He moved fast, opening doors with his knuckles instead of wasting time knocking, calling out in a voice that was careful and low. Preston took the west wing, the sitting rooms, the secondary library, the music room, the guest quarters. He moved quietly, the way Preston always moved, but with a focus that was sharper than usual. I took the upper floors, my office corridor, the main bedrooms, the linen storage, the attic stairs. I went through every room with the methodical patience I used for everything, checking behind doors, looking in corners, calling the name of our Omega even though I did not yet know what his name was. That felt strange, calling for someone I did not know. But the pull in my chest kept guiding me, kept insisting. "He is here. Somewhere. He is here." Declan found the abandoned linen cart in the east corridor first. It was sitting against the wall with a pile of folded sheets on it, slightly rumpled, as if someone had set them down in a hurry. He came to find me and Preston immediately. "Someone left in a rush," he said, and his voice had an edge to it that I recognized. Declan's protective instinct activating. Of the 3 of us, Declan was the most openly reactive. He felt things loudly and acted on them quickly, and right now every part of him was pointed toward finding our Omega with an urgency that was almost visible. "Why would he run?" Preston said, more to himself than to us. We did not have an answer for that yet. We checked every remaining indoor room. We opened closets and balcony doors and the small room behind the kitchen where extra furniture was stored. We went back through the east library and the west sitting rooms and even the basement where the old wine cellar and the utility rooms were housed. He was not inside. I stopped in the main hall. The pull in my chest was still present, still clear, still pointing, and I turned slowly, following the feeling until I was facing the back of the estate. "The garden. The garden," I said aloud. Declan and Preston both turned. "He went outside," Preston said. I was already moving toward the back door. The evening air was cold and clean, and the garden was dark in the way that gardens get after sundown when no one has turned on the outdoor lights. All deep shadows and soft shapes, the flowers just pale outlines, the hedges tall and black against the purple sky. I stepped out onto the stone pathway. The pull was stronger here. It was almost urgent now, the way a sound gets louder as you walk toward its source. I followed it without hesitation, moving down the main path, past the fountain, past the oak tree, deeper into the garden. Declan was behind me, Preston beside me. None of us spoke. The garden was quiet. The only sounds were our footsteps on the stone and the faint rustling of the willow at the far end of the property. And then, as we rounded the last curve of the hedge wall and the weeping willow came into view, I saw him. A boy, small, slight, curled on the stone bench beneath the hanging willow branches with his knees drawn up and his head resting on his own folded arms. His uniform, the gray and white of the household staff, was pressed neatly despite the fact that he was sleeping on a garden bench. His hair was dark and slightly long, falling across his forehead. His face, what I could see of it, was peaceful in the way that people only manage when they are deeply, fully asleep. And his skin, in the dim light, there was a faint shimmer to it, barely there, like the lightest possible dusting of gold, visible only because the last trace of evening light was catching it at just the right angle. Declan made a sound beside me. Not quite a word, more like the involuntary exhale of someone who has just seen something that genuinely startles them. Preston was completely still. I stood at the edge of the willow branches and looked at the sleeping boy on the stone bench, and something happened in my chest that I did not have a word for yet. Something settled. Something that had been subtly wrong for as long as I could remember. A low, constant wrongness that I had learned to ignore because I did not know it was there until this very moment. Suddenly went quiet. He was our Omega. He was asleep in the garden in the cold evening air. And something about the way he was curled on that bench, small and alone and deeply unconscious, out here where anyone could have walked past, far from any warmth or shelter, made something protective rear up inside me with a force I was completely unprepared for. I turned to Declan and Preston. "He is freezing," I said. Declan was already removing his jacket. We did not wake him immediately. I want to explain why, because it might seem strange, 3 grown alphas standing in a dark garden, staring at a sleeping Omega on a bench. But the truth is that waking him felt wrong in that first moment. He was sleeping so deeply, so completely, that disturbing him felt like interrupting something important. And there was something else, something none of us said out loud but all 3 of us understood. He had run. The abandoned linen cart. The way the pull had led us outside rather than through any room in the estate. He had left in a hurry, come out here and fallen asleep, and the question of why he had run was sitting between the 3 of us like a stone none of us wanted to pick up yet. Declan laid his jacket over Casper carefully, settling it across his shoulders and back without touching him. That was Declan, impulsive but not careless. He acted fast, but he was not rough with things that mattered. Casper shifted slightly at the warmth but did not wake. Preston crouched down beside the bench and looked at him for a long moment. In the dark, the faint gold shimmer on Casper's skin was clearer than it had been from a distance, visible on his hands, on the side of his neck, along his jawline. It was not dramatic or overwhelming. It was quiet, like everything else about him seemed to be, a glow that had learned to stay small. "He's been hiding what he is," Preston said quietly. His voice carried the particular weight it got when he was thinking carefully about something. "For a long time, probably." "How can you tell?" Declan asked. "The shimmer. It's only showing because he's unconscious and not managing it. When he's awake, he controls it." Preston looked up at us. "That takes years of practice." I processed that. A rare Omega who had spent years learning to hide himself. Who worked as a maid in a household where 3 alphas lived without any of us ever sensing him for 8 full months. Who had, apparently, overheard something tonight that frightened him enough to abandon his post and run to the far corner of the garden. I sat down on the edge of the stone path, close enough to keep watch but giving him space. Declan remained standing, arms crossed, jacket gone and the evening air clearly not bothering him the way it would bother most people. Declan ran warm, always had. "What did he hear?" Declan said. His jaw was set in the particular way it got when he was working out something that made him angry. "I don't know yet," I said. "Someone in this estate was talking about selling him," Preston said. He still had not looked away from Casper. "That's the most likely reason for that reaction. Fear of being sold." Declan made a sound low in his throat. Not quite a growl, but close. "In our house." "We don't know that for certain," I said. "Griffin." "I know," I said. "I know." I exhaled slowly. But we handle it carefully. We find out what he heard before we start dismantling the staff. Declan looked at me, then at Preston, then back at the sleeping figure on the bench. We should bring him inside, Preston said. The temperature's dropping. Waking Casper was something I thought carefully about for a full 2 minutes before I did it. I did not want him to open his eyes and find 3 large alphas standing over him in the dark. That would be... I could only imagine what that would be, for someone who had been frightened enough to flee and hide. So I asked Declan and Preston to step back, to give distance, and I crouched down at the far edge of the bench rather than leaning over him. Then I said his name. I did not know his name yet. I would learn it in the next few minutes. But in that moment what I said was simple and quiet. Hey, you're safe. Casper stirred. I said it again. You're safe. It's okay. You're in the garden. He came awake slowly, the way people do when they've been deeply asleep. Surfacing in stages, confusion first, then awareness, then a sudden sharp intake of air as the fear came rushing back before his eyes had fully focused. He tried to sit up too fast and nearly rolled off the bench. I caught his arm, just enough to steady him, and then let go immediately. Steady, I said. You're all right. Casper stared at me. In the dark, his eyes were very wide and a deep dark brown, the kind of brown that looked almost amber when the light caught them right. He was staring at me with the concentrated focus of someone trying to figure out whether the situation he had woken up into was dangerous. I stayed exactly where I was, crouched, small as a 6-foot alpha can reasonably make himself. Hands visible. My name is Griffin Aldrich, I said. I'm not going to hurt you. He looked past me and saw Declan and Preston standing back by the hedge, far enough away to be non-threatening, close enough that I could feel the pull between all of us tightening as Casper's awareness sharpened. His lips parted. His voice was rough from sleep, and he stopped, cleared his throat. I fell asleep. Yes, I said. I was going to get up. I was going to leave. I know. Something shifted in his expression. A complicated mix of things, embarrassment, fear, calculation, and something underneath all of it that I could not name yet but that felt strangely like recognition. He looked down at his shoulders and found Declan's jacket there. He looked back up at me. That's Declan's, I said. You were cold. Casper was very quiet for a moment. Then he said carefully, How long have I been out here? About 2 hours, I said. His eyes closed briefly. When they opened again, the fear was back. Not of us, I thought, but of the time. 2 hours he had been unconscious and unprotected. 2 hours during which anyone might have found him. Come inside, I said. Please. It's cold and we need to talk. But only if you want to. You don't have to tell us anything you don't want to. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, I overheard something. Earlier. I know, I said. We'd like to hear it. On your terms. That phrase, on your terms, seemed to land differently than he expected. Something in his posture shifted, just slightly. Not fully relaxed, not trusting, but considering. My name is Casper, he said. Casper Nolan. Hello, Casper Nolan, I said. Behind me, I heard Declan say it too. Quietly, Hi, Casper. And then Preston, even quieter. We're glad we found you. Casper looked between the 3 of us with those wide amber-brown eyes, and I watched him work through something internal. Some calculation or decision or surrender of a fear he had been holding for a very long time. Then he stood up, slowly, carefully, like someone whose legs were still remembering how to hold weight, and he kept Declan's jacket around his shoulders without being asked. Okay, he said. Inside. We brought him to the small sitting room off the main corridor. Not the formal one with the tall windows and the stiff chairs, but the one we actually used, with the worn sofa and the reading lamp and the low table that always had 3 coffee cups on it because none of us were consistent about taking cups back to the kitchen. I noticed Casper clock that detail, 3 cups for 3 people, and something in his expression flickered. He sat on the sofa. Not in the center, but at the end closest to the door. I noted that without commenting on it. Declan disappeared to the kitchen and came back 3 minutes later with a mug of something hot. He set it on the table in front of Casper without flourish or ceremony. Hot chocolate, Declan said. I know it's not. He stopped, rethought his sentence. I just thought it seemed right. Casper looked at the mug. Something in his face went briefly, painfully young. Thank you, he said. Preston sat in the armchair across from the sofa, and I sat on the other end of the sofa from Casper, keeping a careful distance. Declan stayed standing near the doorway, not blocking it, I made sure to notice, but near it. You don't have to tell us everything, I said again. But can you tell us what you heard? Casper wrapped both hands around the mug. The gold shimmer on his skin was almost gone now. Back under control, the way Preston had predicted. He was managing himself again, carefully, the way he had clearly been managing himself for years. I was in the laundry room, he said. 2 men were talking in the corridor outside. I don't know who they were. I didn't see their faces. But one of them said. He stopped, took a breath. He said the rare Omega had already been agreed on, that there was a price, that it would happen in 3 days, maybe less. The sitting room was very quiet. They were talking about me, Casper said. His voice was steady, but the steadiness was the performed kind, the kind that takes effort. I've been hiding what I am since I got here, since before I got here, since I was 12. He looked up from the mug and met my eyes. Someone found out. I held his gaze. Yes, that appears to be the case. And I need to know. He stopped, looked between the 3 of us. His jaw set with a determination that was startling in someone so visibly exhausted. I need to know if it came from this household. The directness of it caught me off guard. He was terrified. I could see it in the set of his shoulders, the controlled pace of his breathing, and he was asking anyway. Looking the 3 of us in the face and asking anyway. Something in my chest tightened. We are going to find out, I said. That's not. I know it's not a full answer, I said. But it's a true one. We did not know about your designation, Casper. Any of us. If we had known. I paused. If someone in this household was making arrangements to sell you, they were doing it without our knowledge. And that is something we are going to address tonight. Casper looked at me for a long time. You felt the pull, he said quietly. It was not quite a question. None of us answered immediately, because none of us were quite prepared for him to say it that plainly, that fast. Yes, Preston said. From across the room. Casper closed his eyes. All 3 of you, he said. Another not quite question. Yes, I said. He was quiet for so long that the only sound in the room was the faint tick of the clock on the mantel and the soft creak of the house settling around us. Then Casper opened his eyes, looked down at the mug in his hands, and said, in a voice that was barely above a whisper, I felt it too. A resonating CTA pause here, because what happens next in this story will change everything. This story is about fear becoming trust, and loneliness becoming belonging, and it is only getting started. If this kind of emotional storytelling speaks to something in you, tap the like button and share this with someone who loves a story that actually means something. Subscribe so you are here when the next chapter of this world drops, because we are just beginning. I did not move. I did not speak. I waited. Casper set the mug down on the table with careful hands. I've felt it before, he said. The pull. With other alphas. He looked up, and there was something very careful and very worn in his expression. The look of someone who has been through things that left marks. It never meant safety. Every time I felt it, the alpha in question wanted something from me. Something I didn't want to give. The room was very still. So you understand, he continued, why I am sitting here trying to figure out whether I can trust the 3 of you, instead of just accepting this. Declan made a sound, quiet, controlled, but the kind of sound that told me how much it cost him to control it. He cared quickly, Declan did. He had already decided about Casper in the garden. I suspected, the moment he laid his jacket over him. That's fair, Declan said. His voice was low. That's completely fair, Casper. Preston leaned forward in the armchair, elbows on his knees, looking at Casper with the focused attention he gave to things he considered important. We are not going to ask you to trust us tonight, Preston said. Trust takes time, takes proof. We know that. He paused. But what we can offer you tonight is this. You are not going to be sold. Not from this house. Not while we are in it. That is not a feeling, that is a fact. Casper looked at him. How do I know that? He said. You don't, Preston said. Not yet. But you will. The next hour was spent doing two things simultaneously. The first, Declan and Preston went through the estate with a thoroughness that I suspected would become something of a legend among the household staff, opening locked rooms, reviewing the visitor log from the past 2 weeks, pulling the security camera records from the exterior cameras. They moved with the particular energy of people who have a mission and no patience for obstacles. The second, I stayed in the sitting room with Casper. He did not ask me to stay, but he did not ask me to leave either. And he was still holding his hot chocolate, now lukewarm, with both hands, and still sitting at the end of the sofa nearest the door, and I recognized in his posture the specific stillness of someone who is waiting to see what happens next while trying very hard not to show how scared they are. So I stayed. I sat at the other end of the sofa and I picked up the book from the side table. It was Preston's, a dense thing about behavioral patterns in pack dynamics, exactly the kind of thing Preston would be reading, and I opened it without really reading it because what I was actually doing was being present. Available. Not pressing. After about 10 minutes, Casper said, You're not reading that. I looked up. The page hasn't turned, he said. I closed the book. You're right. He studied me. Why are you still in here? Because you are, I said. Simply. Another pause. That's not an answer, he said. But the edge in his voice had changed. Less defensive, more curious. You've been alone for a long time, I said. I thought maybe you'd prefer company to an empty room. Even quiet company. I looked at him steadily. But if you want me to go, I'll go. Casper's hands tightened slightly on the mug. Stay, he said. Then, as if he'd surprised himself, please. I stayed. He started talking around the 40-minute mark. Not about the fear or the overheard conversation, or the specific history of every alpha who had tried to use his designation against him. He started smaller than that. He told me about the garden. I've been coming here since my first month, he said. When the work gets too heavy, not the physical kind of heavy, the other kind. I come out there and I sit under that willow and it goes quiet. He looked at the window, even though it was dark and nothing was visible through it. I think it's the lavender. My mom used to grow it. Where is your mother now? I asked, the faintest flinch. She passed when I was 10. I'm sorry, I said. He accepted that with a small nod, the practiced acceptance of someone who has heard condolences many times and has learned to absorb them without letting them take too much. My dad was gone before that. So after she passed, I went into the system. He paused. I cycled through 4 placements in 2 years. The last one was, it was a couple who'd specifically requested an Omega child. I was 12. I didn't know what that meant at the time. His voice was very even. I learned fast. I did not say anything. There was nothing to say that would not be insufficient. I got out, he said. Ran to a night shelter, then a youth program, then eventually I started working. Odd jobs, then household work, then here. He looked at me. I'm good at disappearing, at being small, at being invisible enough that people stop looking for what I'm hiding. 8 months, I said. In this house. 8 months, he confirmed. And then tonight someone found out. Or someone's known for a while and finally decided to act on it. He set the mug down. I was going to leave, he said. Before you found me in the garden. That was the plan. Sleep for a few minutes, make a plan, and leave. He looked at his own hands. I didn't expect to sleep so long. I've been running on 4 hours a night for weeks. My body just gave out. Something in the region of my chest did something complicated. You're exhausted, I said. I'm always exhausted, he said matter-of-factly. That's just what it is. I looked at him, this 19-year-old boy who had been managing himself, hiding himself, running from things, and building a quiet fortress of invisibility around himself for years, and I thought about the thread in my chest and what it meant and what it was going to require of me and my brothers to be what this person needed. Casper, I said, you don't have to run from here. He looked at me with those careful amber brown eyes. You don't know that yet, he said. An echo of what Preston had said to him earlier turned around and reflected back. You said yourself you don't know who was making the arrangement. That's true, I said. But I know what I'm going to do about it. Declan came back first. He appeared in the doorway of the sitting room with an expression on his face that I had learned to read over 23 years. The expression he got when he had found something infuriating and was in the process of deciding how infuriating to allow himself to be about it. Found it, he said. Come look. He glanced at Casper. His expression shifted, the infuriation going briefly soft, the way it only did when Declan was looking at something he had already decided to protect. You should come too, Declan said to Casper. It concerns you. Casper stood up, still holding his jacket, Declan's jacket, still draped over him, and followed us down the corridor to the small office where the security monitors were kept. Preston was already there, standing in front of the monitor with his arms crossed and his jaw set. The screen showed a paused camera feed, the exterior side gate camera, from 3 weeks ago. 2 figures standing at the gate, talking to someone through the intercom. One of the figures was turned slightly toward the camera, and though the image was grainy, it was identifiable. It was Thomas, our estate manager, a man who had worked for the Aldrich family for 11 years. Declan pointed to the second figure, shorter, wearing a dark coat, carrying the kind of document case that contractors used. We ran the plate on the car in the background, Declan said, his voice tight and controlled. It's registered to a private acquisitions firm, the kind that specializes in rare Omega transactions. The room was very quiet. I looked at Casper. He was looking at the screen with an expression that I cannot describe fully. It was too many things at once. Recognition, because this was what he had already feared. Exhaustion, because this confirmation cost something. And underneath it all, something brittle that I was very carefully watching. 11 years, Preston said quietly. And he was making this arrangement on the side. Where is Thomas now? I said. Off premises, Declan said. He took the evening off. He'll be back tomorrow morning. I nodded. He will not be returning to a role in this household. I looked at Casper. You heard what I heard. That is what we found. And that is what we will handle. Casper was very still. You're not, he stopped. Most people would try to protect him. 11 years, you said. That's a long time. People protect people they've known a long time, even when those people. He was going to sell you, Declan said. His voice was calm, but calm the way a held breath is calm, pressurized. There is no amount of years that makes that a thing we protect. Casper looked at Declan. Declan looked back at him, and I watched something happen between them in that look. Something that did not require words and did not need to be explained. A communication between two people who had both learned the same particular lesson about what loyalty actually meant. Casper looked down. Okay, he said. Just that. Okay. But the way he said it, quiet, fractured at the edges, relieved in a way that was almost painful to hear, told me that he had been expecting a different answer. Before we go any further into this story, if this is speaking to something real in you, something about trust and belonging and finally being seen, please hit that like button and subscribe. This community is built on stories like this one, and we want you here for every single chapter. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Preston stepped forward, quietly, the way Preston did everything, and stood beside Casper rather than in front of him. You've been managing this alone for a very long time, Preston said. His voice was the kind of voice that carried without trying, low and clear and unhurried. You don't have to anymore. That's not a request or a condition. It's just true. Casper's jaw tightened. Not with anger, with the effort of not letting his face do what it wanted to do. You barely know me, he said. That's accurate, Preston said. We've known you for about 2 hours in a way that counts. But, he paused, and in that pause the quiet weight of the thing between us. The pull, the thread, the fact that sat in all our chests without asking permission, was present in the room as clearly as if he had named it. That pull doesn't ask for a biography first. It just is. And what we do with it is up to all 4 of us. Casper turned and looked at the camera monitor again. What happens now? He said. Tonight, I said. You sleep somewhere warm. Tomorrow we deal with Thomas. After that, I looked at my brothers, who were both looking at me. After that, we figure out the rest together. Casper turned to look at me. You're very calm, he said. There was something almost accusatory in it. Not angry, but bewildered, like someone who has been in a storm so long that they have forgotten what calm looks like and therefore do not fully trust it. I'm not calm, I said honestly. I'm just better at not showing it. Something in his expression shifted. Me too, he said, and for the first time, barely there, gone almost before it arrived. Something that might have been the beginning of a smile crossed his face. The room we gave Casper was the blue guest room on the second floor. It was not the closest room to the staff quarters, where he had technically been housed before. It was also not the room I would have chosen for him permanently. That was a conversation for later. But it was warm, it had a working lock that he could operate from the inside, and it was 3 doors down from where all 3 of us slept, which meant the pull would be quieter and he would not spend the night aware of us the way he would if he were on a separate floor entirely. I explained this to him practically, without overloading it with meaning. The staff wing is on the far side of the estate, and tonight it's better if you're closer. The room locks from the inside. You'll have privacy. Casper took this in. He looked at the room, the bed with its 4 quilts because I had told the housekeeper on duty to put every spare quilt on it, the glass of water on the nightstand, the window with the curtains already drawn, and something passed through his face that I was starting to learn how to read. It was the look he got when something was more than he had expected. When the world was being kinder than his experience told him it should be. He managed it quickly, the way he managed most things. Thank you, he said, very quietly. Good night, Casper, I said. I left him the room and closed the door softly behind me. Declan was waiting in the hallway. I did not need to ask what he was feeling. I could read it in the set of his jaw and the way he was standing, weight slightly forward, hands at his sides, energy with nowhere to go. Declan processed emotion by moving, and right now he had no sanctioned thing to move toward. I want to call Thomas tonight, he said. Tomorrow, I said. Griffin. Tomorrow, I said again. Tonight. Casper needs quiet. He doesn't need to lie in that room listening to a confrontation happening 3 floors down. I looked at Declan steadily. Thomas doesn't go anywhere tonight. He doesn't know we found what we found. We will handle it correctly, which means not in the middle of the night while we're all operating on adrenaline. Declan exhaled through his nose, long and controlled. He has been terrified for years, Declan said. His voice was low. You understand that? Not just tonight. Years. And Thomas was going to add one more thing to that list. I understand, I said. And you're calm. I told Casper I wasn't calm. I meant it. I looked at him. I am furious, Declan. I am methodically, completely furious. I'm just choosing when to use it. Declan held my gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded, a short, sharp acknowledgement. Fine, he said. Tomorrow. Preston appeared from the direction of the security room, carrying 3 mugs. He had, apparently, made coffee at some point, which was very Preston. He distributed them without ceremony. He fell asleep already, Preston said. He had walked past Casper's door on the way back. The light under the door went out. Declan looked at the ceiling briefly, in the way he did when something was hitting him harder than he wanted it to. Good, Declan said. He needed it. Yes, Preston said. He did. We stood in the hallway for a while, the 3 of us with our coffee, and the house was quiet around us. I did not sleep much that night. I lay in my room with the ceiling above me and thought about Casper Nolan, about the linen cart abandoned in the corridor, about the way he had looked curled under the willow tree, about the gold shimmer on his skin that he had spent years learning to suppress, about the careful way he used words and the very uncalm thing that lived underneath all that careful control, about the fact that he had felt the pull too, and it had not made him happy. It had made him watchful because every time he had felt something like it before, it had been used against him. I was 23 years old, and I had spent most of my adult life being competent and precise in managing things. I was good at managing things. Estates, accounts, decisions, my brother's various intensities. I was not as good at the other category, the one that required something other than management. But this was not a situation that could be managed from a distance. Whatever this was, whatever was going to grow between the four of us, if Casper allowed it, if we were careful and honest and gave him the time and space and proof that Preston had promised. It required something different from me. I thought about that for a long time. Then, around 3 in the morning, I fell asleep. I woke up to the sound of movement in the corridor. It was still dark outside, the quality of darkness that came just before the sky started thinking about dawn. I sat up, already alert the way I always woke, and listened. Footsteps, small and quiet, but audible, moving down the hallway. I got up. When I opened my door, I found Casper standing at the end of the corridor by the window, looking out at the garden below. He was wearing the clothes he had slept in, the gray and white uniform, wrinkled now, and he had his arms wrapped around himself in the unconscious way that people do when they are cold or thinking hard. He heard me come out and turned quickly, alert, prepared, the wariness back like a reflex. I held up a hand, just to show I was not approaching fast. Couldn't sleep, I said. He considered this. I woke up and didn't know where I was for a second, he said. Then I remembered. Then I thought about. He stopped, looked back at the window. I kept thinking about the arrangement, the firm they'd contacted. Thomas has been here 11 years. How many conversations did that involve? How many times did someone look at me and think about it without me knowing? I walked to the window and stood beside him, not close, but not distant, looking out at the same dark garden. I don't know, I said. We'll find out more tomorrow. That's very disciplined of you, Casper said. A slight edge, but the edge was not hostile. It was something else. It's a strategy, I said. Not indifference. He was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. I can tell the difference. He paused. You care. You're just organized about it. I looked at him. He was looking at the garden, and in the blue pre-dawn light, the gold shimmer was visible again. Not suppressed this time, just present, as if in the quiet of the middle of the night his guard had come down enough to let it show. He was beautiful. I did not say this. It was not the right moment, and it would have been too much, and Casper was not at a place where that kind of honesty would land the way it should. But I thought it, clearly and without embarrassment, the way you think something true. Can I ask you something? He said. Yes. The pull. He turned to look at me. You said all three of you felt it at the same time. Does it mean what I think it means? For rare omegas and triplet alphas? I've read about it, but I always thought it was... He stopped. I thought it was the kind of thing that only happened in old stories. It's not only in old stories, I said. So you're saying? I'm saying the pull is real, I said carefully. What it builds into depends on what all four of us choose. It doesn't decide anything by itself. It's a beginning, not an ending. Casper absorbed this. I've never had anyone choose to stay, he said, very quietly. Not for long. The words were simple and the weight of them was not. We're not going anywhere, I said. He looked at me, searching, measuring, the amber eyes going through their careful assessment. Then he said, Declan put his jacket on me before I was even awake. Yes, I said. He didn't have to do that. No, I said. He didn't. A pause. And Preston said trust takes time, Casper said. He didn't try to rush it. Preston is very patient, I said. It is one of his better qualities. And you stayed in the sitting room, Casper said, holding a book you weren't reading. I said nothing. I noticed, he said. I noticed all of it. He looked back at the garden. I notice everything. It's a survival skill. And what I noticed tonight was, he stopped, took a breath. You were all careful with me, in different ways, but careful. Yes, I said. Why? Because you matter, I said. Because the pull told us that before we ever saw your face, and everything we've learned tonight has confirmed it, and being careful with things that matter is the only way I know how to operate. Casper looked at me for a long, long moment. Then he said, okay. Just that. Okay. The same word he had used in the security room, but different this time. Warmer. Something in it that was maybe not quite trust yet, but was pointed in that direction. Go back to sleep, I said gently. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. He looked back at the window one more time. "The garden looks different from up here," he said. "The willow looks smaller." "Things usually do," I said. "Once you're not hiding in them." He turned and looked at me sharply, and then, slowly, something that was fully and unmistakably a smile crossed his face. Small, cautious, slightly crooked. Nothing like the performed pleasantness I had seen on him during 8 months of passing in the corridor while he carried trays. Real. "Good night, Griffin," he said. "Good night, Casper." He went back down the corridor. I stood at the window for another minute, looking out at the dark garden and the willow at the far end, and the thread in my chest was warm and present, and for the first time in my life felt like the most natural thing in the world. Morning arrived with the particular sharpness of autumn. Declan was up first, which was unusual. Normally Declan was the last to surface, requiring at least 2 cups of coffee before he reached full conversational capacity. But I found him in the kitchen at 6:15, standing over the stove with a focused expression, making breakfast. "You're cooking," I said. "I can cook," he said without turning around. "You haven't voluntarily cooked since the incident with the smoke alarm in 2021. This is different." I sat down at the kitchen table and looked at what he was making: eggs, toast, orange juice in a real glass, not one of the paper cup things he usually grabbed. More food than the 3 of us would eat by ourselves. "Casper," I said. Declan's shoulders did something complicated. "He's been on 4 hours of sleep a night for weeks. I'm making him breakfast." He turned, spatula in hand, expression fully in the category of try to say something about it. "He's going to eat actual food this morning." I held up both hands. I wasn't going to argue. Preston appeared in the doorway, already dressed, carrying his phone. He looked at the stove. He looked at Declan. He said nothing, but the corner of his mouth moved slightly. "Thomas is back on the property," Preston said. "His car is at the gate. I've asked him to wait in the front office." Declan's grip on the spatula tightened briefly. "After breakfast," I said before Declan could speak. Declan turned back to the stove. Casper appeared in the kitchen doorway at 6:30, wearing the clothes from the night before, hair slightly disordered, carrying an expression of someone who had slept better than expected and was not quite sure how to process that. He saw the breakfast on the table. He looked at Declan. Declan pointed at a chair with the spatula. "Sit." Casper blinked. "Please," Declan added. Then, slightly awkwardly, "I should have said that first." Something in Casper's face went through a sequence that ended somewhere gentle. He sat down at the table and Declan put a plate in front of him, and the 4 of us ate breakfast together in the Aldrich kitchen for the first time. It was not dramatic or ceremonial. Preston talked about what he had found in the security records overnight. Declan refilled everyone's orange juice without asking. I told Casper what the morning's plan looked like and what we intended to say to Thomas, and I asked him whether he wanted to be present for that conversation or would prefer to be elsewhere. Casper thought about it. "I want to be there," he said. "I want to hear what he says." Declan nodded. "Then you'll be there." The conversation with Thomas lasted 11 minutes. I had expected it to be longer. I had prepared for denials, for deflection, for the particular kind of defensive maneuvering that people engaged in when they had been caught doing something they knew was wrong. I had the camera evidence and the vehicle registration and the name of the acquisitions firm, and I was prepared to lay each one out systematically until there was nowhere left to go. But Thomas, when he walked into the front office and saw the 4 of us, me, Declan, Preston, and Casper, seated across the table from his chair, simply looked at Casper for a long moment and then looked at the table. And then he said, "I understand. Not I'm sorry. Not I can explain. Just I understand," in the voice of someone who had been found out and had decided, for whatever reason, that performing innocence was not worth the energy. "Then let's keep this brief," I said. He confirmed the arrangement. Yes, he had contacted the firm. Yes, there was a price agreed upon. Yes, he had known about Casper's designation for approximately 3 months. He had seen the shimmer once, early morning, when Casper had not known anyone was watching. He had made a contact. The firm had been interested immediately. He did not look at Casper again while he talked. Casper, beside me, was very still. When Thomas finished, I told him that his employment was terminated, that he would be escorted from the property by the end of the hour, and that if the firm he had contacted made any further attempt to reach Casper or this household, the legal and financial consequences would be significant and swift. I said all of this in a level voice, and Thomas nodded at each point, and there was nothing dramatic about it. The drama was in what happened after Thomas left the room. Declan stood up the moment the door closed and walked to the window with his back to us, and stood there with his hands at his sides and his whole posture doing something that I recognized as the physical expression of Declan not letting himself say what he wanted to say. Preston looked at Casper. Casper was still seated. He was looking at the table, at his own hands, flat against the wood, and the gold shimmer was visible on his skin again, more pronounced than it had been, running up the backs of his hands and along his wrists. He was not managing it. Either he had forgotten to, or he was too overwhelmed to, or, I thought it might be the third option, he had decided somewhere in the last 12 hours to not bother. To let it show. "Hey!" Preston said, quiet and direct. Casper looked up. "It's done," Preston said. "It's handled. He's gone." Casper's jaw worked. He pressed his lips together. "I know," he said. His voice was rough. "I know, He stopped. 3 months. He knew for 3 months and I was right there. Every morning. I brought him coffee twice a week. I had no idea." "That's on him," Declan said from the window. His voice was tight. "Not on you. Your instincts kept you safe for years. You can't detect every threat. That's not a failure." Casper looked at Declan's back. "You're angry," Casper said. "Yes," Declan said. "At me." Declan turned from the window. His expression, usually so readable, was doing something complex, frustration and protectiveness and a kind of raw honesty that Declan only showed when he had stopped bothering to manage himself. "At the situation," Declan said. "At Thomas. At every person before Thomas who looked at you and saw something to take instead of someone to know." He held Casper's gaze. "Not at you. Never at you." Casper stared at him. Then, very quietly, "Nobody's ever said it like that before." Declan crossed the room and sat down in the chair beside Casper. Not across, beside, and he didn't touch him or crowd him, but the proximity itself was a statement. "Get used to it," Declan said. "We're going to keep saying things like that." The days that followed were not simple or instantly healed. I want to be honest about that because honesty is the thing Casper responded to most. More than gestures, more than grand statements, more than the pull. Honesty. Directness. Being told the truth of a situation without the edges softened past recognition. He stayed in the blue guest room. Not because we assigned it to him. After the second day, I asked him directly if he wanted to move to something more permanent, something that was actually his rather than temporary, and he had said yes, but then asked if he could think about which room. So he spent 2 days walking through the unoccupied rooms of the second floor, looking at them with a measuring eye, and on the third day he chose a room at the end of the hallway with a window that overlooked the garden. "Because of the willow," he said when I asked. "Of course," I said. He still worked. This was a conversation we had on the second morning, when he appeared in the kitchen in his uniform and Declan looked at the uniform with an expression that made his feelings about it visible. "I need to work," Casper said, before anyone could say anything. I don't know how to not work, and I don't want to be something that sits in a room and gets taken care of. That's not." He looked between the three of us. "That's not who I am." "We know," Preston said. "Then don't take this from me," Casper said. The edge in his voice was quiet but clear. "We're not taking anything," I said. "But we are renegotiating. You will work here if you want to work here. But you will have a contract and a proper rate and a title that reflects what you actually do. And you will have days off. Real ones." Casper looked at me. "And the uniform changes," Declan said. "The gray and white is," he paused. "You can wear what you want." Something flickered in Casper's face. That sequence again, the one that ended somewhere gentle. "You don't like the uniform." "I don't like the gray," Declan said. "It makes you look like you're trying to disappear." Casper was quiet for a moment. "I was," he said. "I know," Declan said. "But you don't have to anymore." The healing was slow and uneven, the way real healing is. There were good days, days when Casper was present in a way that was different from his performed invisibility, when he sat in the small sitting room in the evenings and read or talked or simply existed in the same space as us without the careful management. Days when the gold shimmer on his skin was just part of how he looked, unguarded and visible, and he would glance down at it sometimes with an expression that was not embarrassed but not quite comfortable either, the expression of someone relearning what it meant to be seen. There were also difficult days. Days when he woke up with the specific quietness that was not peaceful but defensive, when the management was back full force and he moved through the house like he was trying to take up as little space as possible. When a door slamming somewhere in the estate made him go very still before he visibly reminded himself where he was. On those days, Declan would find reasons to be in the same room without demanding conversation. Preston would leave books with marked pages on surfaces near where Casper was working. I would find small logistical things to update him on, things that required him to be consulted, to have an opinion, to be treated as someone whose input mattered. None of us talked about it explicitly, but Casper noticed. "You all do different things," he said one evening about 2 weeks in. He was sitting on the kitchen counter, a habit he had developed, the kitchen being the room where none of us were in formal mode, eating an orange and watching the three of us navigate the space. "When I'm having a hard day, you each do a different thing. Is that okay?" Preston said. Casper considered this with the seriousness he applied to most questions. "Yes," he said. It's okay." He peeled another section of the orange. "It means you're paying attention to me specifically, not just to the idea of me." "You are specific," Declan said. He was at the counter making coffee and his back was partly turned, which was probably why he said it with less than his usual deliberateness. Just a simple, honest statement thrown over his shoulder. "You're not an idea." Casper looked at the back of Declan's head for a moment. Then he ate his orange and said nothing, but the shimmer on his skin brightened very slightly, the way it did sometimes when he was feeling something he was not prepared to name yet. 3 weeks in, Casper came to find me in my office. I was working through correspondence. The estate ran a number of external interests, and the paperwork was constant, and I looked up to find him standing in the doorway with an expression that was deliberate. He had chosen to come here. He had something to say. "Come in," I said. He came in and sat in the chair across from the desk, the formal chair, not the comfortable one by the bookshelf that was clearly for non-business conversations. He had chosen the formal one, I thought, because he wanted this to be a proper conversation. "I want to tell you something," he said. "All right," I said, and I put the correspondence aside. "I've been thinking about the pull," he said. "About what you said, that it's a beginning and not an ending. That what we build depends on what we choose." He looked at his hands for a moment, then back up at me. "I think I've been waiting for the thing that makes me decide to stop waiting. The evidence. The proof that Preston mentioned." "And," I said. "Declan's jacket," he said. "That's the first thing that landed. Before I was even awake. He didn't need to do that. It wasn't strategic. It was just, he thought I was cold, and he did something about it. I waited. And Preston didn't push," Casper said. "Every person in my life who wanted something from me pushed. He said trust takes time, and then he actually let it take time. He didn't bring it up again. He just acted like he meant it." "He did mean it," I said. "I know that now," Casper said. He took a breath. "And you stayed in that sitting room pretending to read a book you weren't reading because you thought I'd prefer not to be alone. You didn't explain it. You didn't ask for credit for it. You just did it." The office was very quiet. "I've been adding things up," Casper said. "For 3 weeks. Every small thing. And he paused. His jaw was doing the thing it did when he was managing something emotional. "I wanted you to know that I see it. That it's working. That I'm not running anymore." Something in my chest that had been wound very carefully unwound just slightly. "Casper," I said. "I'm not saying I'm done being careful," he said quickly. "I'm still going to be careful. That's how I'm built. I can't just—" "I know," I said. "I wouldn't ask you to be anything other than what you are." He stopped. "That's one of the things," he said quietly. "Nobody's ever said that to me before either." The evening of the 22nd day was when everything shifted. Not dramatically. Not in the way of things shattering or declarations being made in grand settings. It happened in the garden, which felt right. The garden had been the beginning, after all, the place where Casper had run to and fallen asleep, and the three of us had found him under the willow. It was Declan who suggested going out there. He had a habit of wandering in the evenings, working off the energy that collected in him throughout the day, and lately Casper had started joining him. Not because either of them planned it, but because they would both end up in the kitchen at around 7:30 and then end up outside at around 8 without either of them making a deliberate announcement about it. Preston and I had noticed this and said nothing. On the 22nd evening, all four of us ended up in the garden. We ended up at the willow. Casper stood in front of it for a moment, looking at it. The same bench, the same hanging branches, the same corner where he had run to and slept and where everything had changed. "It does look smaller from up here," he said. "You said that the first night," Declan said. He was standing close to Casper, not pressing, just close in the way that Declan existed near things he cared about. "I remember." Casper reached out and touched one of the hanging branches, ran his fingers along it. "I used to come out here because it felt like the only place I could stop performing. Stop managing." He turned to look at us, all three of us taking his time, moving from face to face. "I don't feel that way about just the garden anymore." The evening air was cool. The lavender was still blooming, though the season was turning and it would not be much longer. "Tell us what you feel," Preston said. Casper looked at him. "Safe," he said. The word came out simply, without decoration or qualification. It's a simple word for something that doesn't feel simple, but that's the truest version of it. He looked down at his own hands, at the gold shimmer that was fully visible in the evening light, unmanaged, unhidden. "I've been hiding this my whole life, since I was 12 years old. I have spent so many years making myself small and invisible and unthreatening that I forgot." His voice fractured slightly at the edge. He cleared it. "I forgot what it feels like to just exist, to just be here, without it being dangerous." Declan reached over and put his hand on Casper's shoulder. Steady and warm and without drama. Casper looked at the hand. Looked at Declan. Declan looked back at him with the particular expression he had when he had stopped managing himself entirely. Open and clear and completely real. "You exist here," Declan said. "This is your place. The garden, this house, all of it. Yours." Preston stepped forward and stood on Casper's other side. The three of us making a loose shape around him, close but not crowding, present without pressure. "We have you," Preston said. Casper's jaw was working hard. "I'm not going to fall apart," he said, half defensive, half warning himself. "You can if you want," I said. "We'll still be here." Something in Casper gave way. Not dramatically, not weeping or collapsing, because Casper was not built for the large gestures. It was quiet. It was a long exhale, and the gold shimmer on his skin brightening in a way it had never done in our presence before, warm and clear and fully present, and his shoulders dropping from the position they had been holding, braced, tensed, prepared for apparently years. He leaned, slightly, into Declan's hand on his shoulder. Declan's grip tightened, just slightly. We stood in the garden under the evening sky, the four of us, beside the willow where Casper had slept and hidden and been found, and the pull between us was warm and present and patient, and for the first time, I thought it felt less like the beginning of something and more like the shape of something that was already real. Later, much later, after the garden, after tea in the small sitting room, after Casper had gone upstairs and the three of us were alone in the corridor, Declan said something that I have thought about many times since. He said, "He's going to be okay." Not as a question, not as a wish, as a certainty. "Yes," I said. Preston looked up the staircase in the direction of the room at the end of the hall with the window that overlooked the garden. "He already is," he said. "He just doesn't fully know it yet." Declan looked between us. "Then we keep showing him," he said. I nodded. "Yes," I said. "We keep showing him." Casper appeared at the top of the stairs before any of us had moved. He was looking down at us, the three of us standing in the corridor below looking up at him, and his expression was the careful measuring one, but underneath it, barely contained, was something warm and new that had not been there 22 days ago. "I could hear you," he said. "How much?" Declan said. All of it, Casper said. A beat of silence. Good, Preston said. Casper looked at each of us in turn. That slow, deliberate sweep of his amber-brown eyes. Taking his time, not rushing. The way Casper did everything that mattered. Good night, he said. Good night, Casper, I said. Declan raised a hand. Not a wave, just an acknowledgement. Preston said, Sleep well. Casper turned and went back down the hallway toward his room. The door with the window overlooking the garden clicked softly closed. And the pull in my chest was settled and warm and pointing, as it always pointed, toward that room at the end of the hall. Toward the boy who had fallen asleep in the garden and been found, who had run toward safety without knowing that was what it was, who had spent 19 years learning to survive and was now, very slowly, very carefully, learning something entirely different. Learning what it meant to stay. There are stories that remind you what it means to belong somewhere, to finally stop running and find the people who were already looking for you. If the story settled something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling us the moment that got you. We read every single one. Subscribe and tap the bell, because this world is not finished and the next chapter is coming. The world of Casper and the Aldridge triplets continues. A maid who hid in plain sight. 3 alphas who searched every room. A garden where the truth slept and waited to be found. And a belonging that was being built, one careful, honest, irreplaceable day at a time. The story ahead is long, and it is only getting richer. We will see you there.